Understand how lightning rounds work. I will ask a question, and the candidates will raise their hand if they agree. Now there are 10 categories. Again, this is going to go quick. That's why they call it lightning round. And you will each have one opportunity out of 10. So pick the category you want to talk on to address the issue with more than just raising your hand. You can raise your hand and then indicate why you feel the way you feel. So, with that said, you guys ready to roll?
Okay, 1 minute for each candidate. So every candidate has a card, and somebody raised their card and show them their card. So if Jeremy did that, then he would get 1 minute on that topic to talk. But he only gets to talk to one topic. So he has a list of topics there that he can choose, know kind of what's coming next, but he doesn't know the exact question.
So this entire 10-point lightning round probably won't go more than about 15 minutes. Because how you voting, who wants to speak, you get a minute, let's go on. And everyone gets just one chance for 60 seconds. Okay? With that said, transportation modes. I see we've got Husky Purple. The game against Oregon. Here we go. All right. 10 questions. First of all, on terminology, level of service is roughly the same as capacity. Level of service approved by the Council for Vehicles. A means traffic is normally flowing free, while DE means traffic is congested with backups. All right? So with that said, here we go with our question. We're not far from the Wilburton district, okay? Just down the hill. Well, down and up and down the hill. For our candidates, raise your hand if it is acceptable to reduce capacity for vehicles on arterials to improve capacity for bicycles. Raise your hand.
Okay, so right now, I also want you to read the green part too.
Well, Wilburton is maintained at level D for vehicles. At 4 to 6 p.m. is expected vehicles will move at about 11 miles an hour on 116th. Thank you, Chick-fil-A. Drivers increasingly frustrated. So, with that said, as an example, but this of course would apply citywide, not just to Wilburton. This would apply citywide. Raise your hand if it is acceptable to reduce capacity, that means remove a lane, for vehicles on arterials to improve capacity for bicycles, non-motorized vehicles.
Okay, so if nobody raises their hand, also the question, the next thing is ask the audience if they agree or not.
Okay. Audience. Raise your hand if you think it's acceptable to reduce capacity for vehicles on arterials to improve capacity for bicycles. Keep your hand up if you pedaled here tonight. None of us would blame you if you didn't. All right. You can use your card.
Just raise your card up.
But this is of the 10 subject areas we cover. This is the only one you can speak of. If you use your card now, you only get to raise your card and speak for 1 minute at one time. Everybody wait for the last question. Did you want to wait or do you want to go?
1 minute, right? I want to use the card because we have a pen and bike plan that talks about where we are very intentional about putting in bike lanes that are And one of the goals about Vision Zero is that they are protected and separated so that we can get more people to safely ride on our streets, because part of the capacity building is to leverage all of the lanes that we have to get multimodal in Bellevue. So when I think about this question, it is not we are going to put bike lanes everywhere. It is that intentionality about making sure that we're building the commitment of having 2 north-south and 2 east-west through corridors for bikes, because with REI coming, they're building a huge corral for the people that are going to be biking into Bellevue from where their office is back in Kent. And as well as Amazon has a lot of people that are going to be taking alternative modes.
Next, transportation planning. The One Bellevue organization believes that when an area is upzoned, traffic and congestion do not always seem to be integral to planning. The example given is Eastgate. So, candidates, raise your hand if you will strongly support a public hearing focused on traffic and transportation before approving any major upzones on the council. Okay. Oh, and someone's using her card. That would be Jennifer Robertson. No.
So, land use, I'm a land use attorney who represents cities, and I do a lot of transportation policy work as a council member of the region. Land use and transportation are 2 things that go together. You have to have the capacity for the infrastructure, which includes roads, which includes transit, includes pet facilities, when you upzone an area. When we did the Eastgate plan, I was council liaison to that in 2010, and we did look at transportation heavily. The Transportation Commission held a public hearing on the plan. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the land use component, and the council adopted it. They go well together, but when the development starts, that's when the impact fees start to come in, and that's when the traffic starts to come. We are moving forward on some amazing Eastgate projects, which are going to really help mobility in that area. We're doing work now, and there's more that are teed up in the years to come, because that's where the growth is going to be. We cannot grow our land use without having transportation to go with it. Thank you.
Okay. So from bike lanes to public hearings to now our last question on transportation this evening, at least until the Q&A from all of you, is congestion. Eastgate has proven deep traffic studies identify specific projects that reduce vehicle congestion. Ms. Simonette, my English teacher in 8th grade, would call that a run-on sentence, but I think you get the idea. So, candidates, please raise your hand if you support studies for highly congested neighborhood areas and funding projects that make congestion reduction a first priority. Again, raise your hand if you support studies for highly congested neighborhood areas and then funding projects according to what reduces vehicular congestion the most. Show of hands. Mr. Bible, Ms. Robertson, Mr. Yu, Ms. Zahn, Stephanie Walter. Is everybody up except Paula? Okay, that's all right. That's all right. Does anyone want to use their card? Then let's move along.
Okay, what does the audience
JDU, just before the bell. Go ahead.
Sorry.
I think congestion is the most complained problem that you in my doorbell in the neighborhoods, not only the Eastgate, but also all other neighborhoods. And each neighborhood has their own different problem. Some of the neighborhoods say, oh, it's too noisy, and some of them it's a congestion. Here is the congestion. So therefore, we have to be very careful why it's congested. Because, for example, I live in Somerset. At the at the bottom of the Somerset, there's a traffic light. That traffic light it's not intelligent. It just stick, never change. And until really you really want to make a turn, but that's the problem. So we need to understand that part and why other conjections. So the flow could be, but at the same time we need to be careful that the safety. That's very important because we cannot just say, hey, give the road to other, for example, bikes, but sacrifice the vehicles because 84% of the people still rely on the vehicle for transport.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. Okay, now we're going to move on to.
Well, first, what did the audience think of that? Who agrees with that? They agree.
Okay, there we go. Congestion reduction is a major priority with the audience. Yes, we will now poll the audience. Okay, let's move to affordable housing. Bellevue provides incentives to developers to build more affordable housing, tax exemptions, deferrals, and the like. Of course, affordable housing is still an issue because so many people keep moving here. So, with that said, raise your hand if you support mandatory affordable housing requirements for any new multifamily development. Raise your hand if you support mandatory affordable housing requirements for new multifamily development. Okay? Audience, raise your hand if you support mandatory affordable housing requirements for new multifamily development.
Can you define multifamily? How many families? You need to define multifamily.
Okay.
Okay, so can we have a person on the
Apartments and
council?
condos.
Okay, let Jennifer explain it. She knows the definition. I don't know that.
So single-family homes are individual units. Multifamily is anything where you have more than one unit on a single lot, with the exception of accessory dwelling units that are part of single-family homes. That's not multifamily. So apartments, townhomes, high-rise condos, those are multifamily.
Okay. And we have Stephanie Walter is using her card on this question.
Thank you. Affordable housing is really important. There's very many levels of affordable housing. It's affordable to who? So if we can talk about housing affordability, we need workforce housing, we need low-income housing, we need to be able to help seniors stay in their house by keeping their taxes low. And I would lobby Olympia to stop raising taxes on areas like Bellevue where the seniors are being taxed out. The tax credit is not enough. I know people who are leaving the area who built their families here. So affordable housing, if you mandate it, it won't get built. It doesn't pencil, and that's a term I used to not like until I fully understood it. The developers don't have a big pocket of money that they can just go and build. They have to borrow that money, and there has to be a return on investment. There's a formula for investors to invest, for banks to invest. In order for it to be built, it has to pencil. Too many affordable units don't let it get penciled. We need tax rebates, we need multifamily tax credit, we need surplus land. There's a lot of ways to do it that don't mandate, and it will actually get built. So if you want it, don't mandate it.
Okay, we're almost halfway through. The next topic is. You want to use your card? Go ahead. You're using your card.
I think earlier I didn't finish my talk. For affordable housing, according to several times, KUOW, and then also Vancouver, British Columbia, they have done some crackdown on illegal cash buying houses in this area. And also this is a money laundering crime in this area as well. That's cause we have lots of empty foreigner buying houses in this area because they call it wealth storage units, and they just use it as an investment. I think those issues are city council or local government should pay attention, do some more investments. And this issue has happened for quite a few years. And my incumbent, Mr. Stokes, being in the city council for 8 years. And we should do something, not wait, and then have to do something right now.
Thank you very much. The next topic is sleeping in cars. Some people prefer their cars to homeless shelters because you heard it mentioned already here this evening, they feel safer there. Some in safe parking lots, some where they simply find a place to park. So, candidates, raise your hand if you feel that the city should intervene and find solutions that do not require people living in their cars.
What does intervene?
Well, One Bellevue.
Are we arresting?
So I'll take that question. The question is intervene. I changed that from do something. So we're not saying how they should intervene, it's that they should do something. So we had a case of people that said you need to be in your car before you can go to a shelter, things like that. So that's the question. Should you do something?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is it in that moment do something, or generally as a matter of policy do something?
Whatever you think. It's up to you. You guys have to figure out the problems, I don't.
As long as it stays there.
Okay, so this is pretty much, you get to define your own terms. But
Okay, so raise your hands if you agree. Okay.
okay, and with that said, we'll start with James Biden.
In a candidate's forum just like this, only a couple of weeks ago, a well-dressed lady stood up in the back row and she told us all of her circumstances and her woes. Her husband had left, she had gotten sick, and she ended up homeless. She ended up homeless with her 14-year-old child who was attending, I believe, Sammamish High School and was asking for our help, frankly, the help of anyone. And she told us all that even though there are certain rules and things that happen in relation to cars and police in Bellevue, when the police actually saw her, they said, you can park your car over here. You'll be safe right here. Absolutely, we should intervene. We should be in a place where we definitely promote affordable housing, where we move and create shelters that accept children, where we're in a place where we make sure that there are wraparound services, many of which we have already, but we can do better. We shouldn't rest on our laurels, that support families that are stuck in circumstances where they have very little choice but to sleep in cars.
May I say something? That's not the
No,
story.
no, you guys,
You know,
let's wait till we quick. Audience, you can raise your hand if you agree with this.
yeah, we'll have that section coming up.
So do you agree with the raise your hand if you feel this? Yes or no? The city should intervene somehow. Okay? That's about half the audience.
Neighborhood planning outreach is the next category. It says great neighborhood planning is focused on ground-up vision for each neighborhood. Raise your hand if you will strongly support creating a toolkit, you get to define this one too, Pam, to form a baseline of questions for any neighborhood together with neighborhood leaders.
So part of the question here, I'll explain it, the toolkit. Right now we have people going through neighborhood planning in the last year and it hasn't gone anywhere, and part of that is a lot of things, but one of the problems is they're focused on all these problems that they've had forever, and the city seems to be more focused on what do you want in your neighborhood, what's your dream, and it's basically how are we going to deal with all these things right here. So why don't we look at all the neighborhood plans right now and figure out what are those problems that we have issues with already before we go into all this planning and dreaming. That's the question.
Okay. So with that said, go ahead and raise your hand if you support creating a toolkit to form a baseline of questions for neighborhoods in these processes. Okay, and John Stokes is using his card. Go ahead, Councilman.
So Holly didn't raise her hand, but everyone else.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I think, every neighborhood's different, every neighborhood's the same. And when we were discussing this, I argue very strongly that we should actually have a baseline and we should look at what are common in your neighborhoods and what we can work on that would be across all of them. Because if we take two neighborhoods every 2 years, it's going to take us more than a decade to actually get through with that. And things are changing so rapidly. So this is a good idea. It's really to go and find out, talk to the neighborhoods. We have neighborhood meetings. We have neighborhood groups come in, 2 or 3 times a year. We can bring them in, all the neighborhood leaders, open up a meeting and do this. And then we start with that and say, okay, so, I'm from Woodridge, and so this is what Woodridge and Wilburton have in common, for example. And then find out what's different and focus on that. We have to be more efficient and effective, and we cannot wait to work on the neighborhoods and find out what's going on, what you need, for 10 years, because things just change too quickly. So I think this is a good idea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stokes. All right.
The audience? A little bit about half of the audience, maybe 2/3.
Okay. 7 out of 10, here we go. Neighborhood planning schedule. Neighborhood plans are scheduled to be completed at 2 per year. The update for the comprehensive plan is scheduled to be completed by 2023. So raise your hand, candidates, if you support funding a majority of neighborhood plans before the comprehensive plan is in full swing.
Taxes?
No. It means funding as in the city council budget.
All I know is whoever wrote this question never misses a council meeting. Lots of detail here, okay? Raise your hand, candidates, if you support funding completing a majority of the neighborhood plans before the comprehensive plan work is in full swing in 2022. Okay. No one raising their card on that?
Okay,
Audience?
so we had, I'm sorry, could you raise your hands a lot higher? I didn't see everybody. Janice,
Just about
James, and
everybody.
Molly.
Okay. So now we're on to number 8. Something you can wrap your arms around a little more easily here. Neighborhood character. Raise your hand, candidates, first, if you feel that the city should restrict building size in keeping with the existing homes and character of the neighborhood. Raise your hand.
So read the green part.
Well, in single-family neighborhoods, some allowable footprints are out of scale with the existing homes, which results in what are called McMansions. They take down 2 single homes and they build a mini mansion there. On the other hand, restricting what could be built in the future would reduce the property value. So, with that said, raise your hand if you feel that the city should restrict the size of homes in keeping with the existing homes and character of the neighborhood. So if you've got say a neighborhood where you've got between 2,000 and 3,000 square foot homes, you would not permit a 7,500 square foot home. So again, candidates, raise your hand if you believe the city should restrict the size of homes, new homes, in keeping with the existing size of homes of the neighborhood.
Nobody's fighting.
No takers? All right.
Anybody in the audience?
Audience?
So about 4th of the audience.
Yes. All right. On to number 9 of 10, code compliance. The City Council has directed code compliance not to act unless there is someone complaining. Neighbors are sometimes uncomfortable calling out neighbors. Well, I don't know. If they can do it in secret, I don't know if people can do it. Anyway, neighbors are uncomfortable calling out neighbors by name. Those called out feel it is unfair when they see similar violations going on. So, candidates, please raise your hand if you would direct code compliance to act proactively by creating a list of issues and to enforce and prevent those issues. If there are any questions about what that means, Pamela will.
So it's common issues, not every issue, of course, but getting a list of things that happen all the time over and over and over again. And people feel uncomfortable calling out their neighbors, I guess, on like big piles of like leftover stuff in the house getting built or something, construction materials from the front lawn.
With the
And
blue
then
tarps or stuff
Yeah,
like that.
they see other people getting away with it, so why did they get caught? So if we had common list of issues. Shaden?
No,
Oh, you're just raising your hand?
Yeah.
So raise your hand if you would like them to work on some common issues that come up over and over.
By creating a list of common issues to enforce as well as prevent.
The vote is to act proactively.
Right. So prevent, enforce, and prevent. So prevent would be maybe some education on some of these common issues that keep on coming over and over and over again. Because maybe people don't even know that it's a law. I wouldn't have known it's a law. The RV laws here are so much different than Montana. You know, we like to have our RVs showing up. But, here we have to keep it behind a screen. So it's just different laws, knowing what the laws are in the state.
So do you mean you want our code compliance officers to drive around the city and look for violations? That's what we're asking.
If they're common violations, yes.
She does cut to the chase, doesn't she?
Well, I'll give another example. Another example is if you say you saw an Airbnb ad that says that this thing is illegal, they don't investigate it because they don't have an address for it. So that's another thing. So, okay, how about the audience?
Okay.
Okay.
So the last question on our lightning round, this is a good one because so many competing principles here. The issue is trees. The city is committed to a 40% tree canopy goal. We have tree canopy 40% of the landmass of Bellevue, but it does not have a plan to get there. A tree master plan would allow timely and effective decisions, setting a minimal standard for all the neighborhoods to have a shared direction, mature trees from being removed.
And it's before the Great Neighborhoods program. So
Great
right
Neighborhoods
now,
program,
the
okay.
trees program is like when we get to the Great Neighborhood planning, when it gets to you in 10 years, you'll have a chance to weigh in on it. Until then, you don't get a chance to weigh in it because we're not doing overall city planning.
Can I throw something else in here? One of the things you don't mention is, should there be city restrictions on people cutting trees on their own property?
Well, that kind of goes into this issue because if you cut the trees, but part of that is through the master planning process, we would all come to an agreement on whether we should or not.
Okay, so with that
that's
said-
why I'm not saying like what you should do or what you shouldn't do, but can we come together on this issue?
Okay, so with that said, candidates, if you could please raise your hand if you think the city of Bellevue should complete a citywide tree master plan to reach that 40% tree canopy goal. Councilman Stokes says we have
It's
one.
fine with me because we have it right.
All right.
Yeah, we're working on it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that a yes up and down the road here? And did someone want to use their card? Okay. Is that yes or no? Okay, good. So with that said, lightning round is finished. This is a question that I think many of you are waiting to see the candidates ask. All the candidates are asked one question. This time we're going to start with Stephanie Walter and go this way, and then we'll start with Janice Zahn, go this way. Here we go.
let me key it up here for a second. Stephanie will have 1 minute, Jeremy will have 1 minute, and Stephanie has 30-second rebuttal, and then Jeremy has 30-second rebuttal. So we'll do it as
A mini debate.
a mini debate between the two, yeah.
And here's why the rebuttals. The motto of the Bellevue City Council is 7 strong. And voters need to understand who best matches their views and values. So, candidates, what distinguishes you from your opponent? What's the difference? And why you and not him or her? Include views, values, and vision. Stephanie Walton.
Okay, I've lived in Bellevue 30 years, over 30 years, and I decided to run for council because of my experience. But doorbelling around Bellevue, I was inspired. I was inspired by people in Bellevue and how much they care about their city. They think there is a lot to preserve and protect in Bellevue, and I completely agree. I've lived through many of life's cycles in this city. I'm newlywed, young mother, school-aged children, empty nester, and I helped my mother through her end-of-life care. I've seen a lot of things. I can represent babies to seniors, newly arrived people in Bellevue to founders of the city. I've seen so much and I've listened to so much. I've been on my neighborhood association board for several years now. I served as chair of the Planning Commission. I'm currently elected to the East Bellevue Community Council, and I am a community builder and a consensus builder. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie Walton. Okay, Jeremy Barksdale, what distinguishes you from Stephanie?
All right. So, in addition to having a diverse academic, professional, and community service background, in terms of having a tech degree, I have a PhD in computer science as well as a master's in public administration, have worked in private industry as well as the public sector and the federal government. And so I've had this range of experience over the years, and I've been involved in my community all my life since I was a youth. So while I may have moved to Bellevue just 6 years ago, I've been involved ever since I was a youngster. And since I've been here, I've been involved. I immediately looked for opportunities and also served on the Planning Commission and also just finished a term and currently still serving on the Planning Commission. And so, what's big for me, and also co-chaired the Wilburton Citizen Advisory Committee, where, I prioritize making sure that, and push for making sure that we have community engagement as well as making sure that voices are heard as part of a collaborative environment.
All right, thank you very much. Quick rebuttal, and again, you can rebut or choose not to, or use part of your time rather than all of it. It's up to you. Go for it, Stephanie.
Okay, if we're going to talk about job experience, I have a background in finance. I've worked at hospitals. I've also worked in tech. I left working in tech to go back to work in a service industry because that was important to me to give back to my community. I put people over politics, and I put Bellevue residents over political party.
All right, Jeremy.
So I usually talk about my day-to-day job, and also when we think about leadership in terms of adaptive leadership and acknowledging that, when we're talking about community work, we're talking about work that doesn't have a fixed answer. It involves engaging with the community. My day-to-day job as a researcher is just that, advocating for users, getting their input, engaging them. And what I've heard at the door and what I've heard throughout the community is you want to be engaged, and that's what I do day to day, and I commit to doing that.
Thank you very much, Jeremy Barksdale. Let's now go to Holly Zhang and John Stokes. Holly, what distinguishes you from Councilmember Stokes?
I'm an immigrant. I was born in a small poor village, and I have come this far not by chance, by the choice. And I lived in the U.S. for 17 years, and I have run my small business, and my husband too, for over 10 years in downtown Bellevue. And we have raised over $200,000, and this money given back to the hospitals and helping families in the last 10 years. And we have done over 300 fundraising events through 3 states for hospitals. And I married outside my race, and I have a missed baby, just turned 2 years old. And my campaign is also diverse, and I represent the diversity.
Okay, thank you very much. John Stokes.
I've been involved in this community since 1992, worked on every bond and levy campaign for the district. I supported and worked on the bond campaign for the parks at the 2006. And I've worked, and I was on the Parks Board for 3 years. I've been involved in planning for all the parks that we all enjoy now, and it's been a great delight to actually go there and see those. In addition to that, I've been very heavily involved in education in all sorts of ways. Bellevue School Foundation for 14 years. I was a co-founder of Eastside Pathways that is dedicated to be a backbone agency to make sure that every child has a chance to succeed. And it's a fantastically successful organization that works across the city. I've been involved with I'm chair of the Y8 Salmon Recovery Council, and I have long experience and I have the breadth and depth to keep us moving forward.
Holly, is there anything you want to rebut? Or add?
I was born in the village. My childhood has made me solving some tough problems. And I always think outside the box. And our city facing so many issues. And I want to bring to the city new solutions, new energy, and new blood. And shelters are good, but they are short-term solutions. They are not long-term solutions. So that's my incumbent propose. But I will do housing first.
And now John Stokes.
I brought a lot to this city, and including something very exciting new called the Downtown the Grand Connection, and just got back from Dallas with VDA trip, and we're working on that, and that's something, I brought a lot of new things to this community. We can all do that, and it's necessary to have it up and down the line. And there's a part of diversity in me. One, I'm from Texas and grew up in a segregated situation, and I am a little bit older, and I think that makes it important. But as far as the shelters go, yes, shelters and housing have to come together, and shelters are temporary, and they're focused to make sure people can be successful.
Thank you very much. Okay, James Bible and Jennifer Robertson. Mr. Bible.
I run an organization in which I was the supervisor and executive director of 22 different other chairs that included economic development, finance, veterans affairs, civil rights, human rights, housing, police accountability, and the like, and political action. I've been just about everything in Bellevue, from a tenant in a one-bedroom to a person that lives in a house, to a service worker, to somebody that's a business owner, to a lawyer, to a student in middle school and high school. I am absolutely dedicated to being in a place where I do the best that I can for you, and I'm honest about it. I won't rest on my laurels or the laurels of anybody else. I will tell you honestly what I think we can do, and I'll try to push for that. And it won't just be about developing a plan. It will be about executing that plan and making it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Bible. Jennifer Robertson.
Thank you. There are 3 things that differentiate me from my opponent. 1 is my record of service to the people of Bellevue. 2 is my professional expertise and knowledge that I've gained from my profession and my years of service. And 3 is that I approach serving on the Bellevue City Council in a nonpartisan way. I have not sought nor received endorsements from either political party, and I take that very seriously because we represent everybody. So first, on my record of service. Before I was on the council, I was on the planning commission for 6 years. I chaired that. I chaired the light rail committee. But going back before that, I was involved with my neighborhood association, and with my neighbors. I've done a huge record of service on the schools with PTA boards. I've been a Girl Scout leader for almost 10 years now, because I believe that love is a verb, and I love this city, and I've shown it by my years of service. I've been on the council for 10 years. My background is I'm an attorney who represents cities with a specialty in land use, so I have an expertise that no other council member in Bellevue or many other places has, and that has been very helpful at being an effective advocate for you.
James Bible.
I've served my neighborhoods too, every day. Maybe not as a council member, but as a human being, interacting with my neighbors, doing anything that I can help, having previously worked for the YMCA with children, having been a foster parent of 2 kids that couldn't be housed anywhere else. A therapeutic foster home is what I did and how I worked. I've been in a place where I've been absolutely dedicated to anybody that needed help and needed some form of assistance, and have been a person that's always been dedicated to solutions.
Ms. Robertson.
Thank you. Bellevue has a lot of complex issues with the Amazon announcement, affordable housing, homelessness. It is not the time now for on-the-job training. Experience matters. I have expertise in public safety, transportation, and land use through my record of service, which means I can be really effective. The other thing that I have is I have connections to legislators, council members, county council members, all throughout the region. The number of people on my phone who make decisions in the state of Washington is a lot, and you would lose that if I'm not reelected. Thank you.
No, it's 1-30-30.
Okay.
And finally, JDU and Holly Zhang. I'm sorry, Janice. JDU and Janice. Thank you. Mr. Yu.
I have a vision for Bellevue. Bellevue is a very safe place that multiple and diverse communities will enjoy the high quality of life and a thriving economy. And I have a lot of values, but as a council member, I will be very for the accountability and integrity. I will be accountable for the people, residents, and voters, because that's my responsibility. And integrity, I say what I do what I say. And I have views that I say neighborhood first, always. Neighborhood safety must not be compromised. I know low barrier homeless shelter near our neighborhoods and schools, and no heroin injection sites. I am an independent candidate. I don't have an endorsement from the people who have influence to the Seattle policy. I don't want those policies to come into our Bellevue. Thank you.
Right. And again, I've been up since 3:30 this morning, so I'm sorry I messed up your name, Janice.
So I'm running for re-election as a bridge builder, as a collaborator, and I absolutely believe in and live the 7 Strong motto, because ultimately I believe in the vision of Bellevue and the 3-year priorities that we adopted at our retreat. And the way we're going to move forward is together in unison, because with Amazon coming, we need experienced people who are going to be able to work together to figure out how to work through the kind of challenges that kind of growth is going to have in our community. I have experience working in government for the last 15 years. I have a lot of relationships both at the local level, supported by our local leaders, our state legislators. I also have advocated at the federal level for funding on the commute pool, as well as going down to Olympia to work on your behalf, because advocacy absolutely matters. We cannot fund the kind of things we need to do alone. We need to do it in partnership.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yu. 30 seconds.
I once was awarded the Peak Award from the T-Mobile because I was one of the very outstanding engineer. I did a very good job, and I have a lot of other experience involved not only the community but also the city. And the experience is also I have a lot, but the important is leadership is what I have, and I have the vision. I want Bellevue to go the right direction. I don't want the Bellevue to become like a second Seattle.
last 30 seconds of this entire segment goes to Janice Zone.
Leadership is about going together as Seven Strong. No one of us has that magic pixie dust and the one solution. The way we're going to solve issues is by doing it together, by being in the community, by listening and working together in partnership. That is both with the community as well as with businesses. I've been endorsed by both folks in the community as well as business and our state legislators, because it is those partnerships that will get things done.
All right, candidates, thank you very much. Another round of the forum belongs to you. We have a short period of time for a question and answer. Pam, how's it going to work?
So I'd like first, if anybody has a question that has not been covered, the area of topic has not been covered tonight. Let's see if anybody has a question like that. Okay, so, Lucian, come on.
All right, my question is directed towards Mr. Bible. You mentioned on one of the handouts that I received that you plan to deal with economic growth by increasing minimum wage. And I know that Seattle recently increased their minimum wage, and studies have shown that even an increase from $11 to $13 resulted in, although workers obviously were paid higher, the consequence was that employers had to give them reduced hours, had to lay off workers, etc. And they found that low-wage jobs, hours decreased by 6 to 7%, while wages only increased by 3%. So my question for you is, how are you going to make sure, if we do raise the minimum wage, that we don't have a reduce in hours and thus less pay for these workers?
Thank you for your question. It's well thought out, and I think you typed it up and did all those things, and that's great. The reality is that there are a lot of studies in relation to affordable wages, living wages, and increasing the minimum wage. And also reality is that many of those minimum wage studies actually say that those that are now receiving more money are doing better than they've ever done. One of the things that's ever present is that we often don't go far enough in terms of our minimum wages. So if you cite one study, you got to cite the other studies as well. And New York City is a clear example of minimum wage actually doing very well, even though they haven't raised it enough.
Next question.
Another topic that hasn't been really
I worked in Amazonia, in Westlake, in Seattle, and it was a nightmare. I believe in bicycles. I love Amsterdam, but bicycle traffic was a nightmare. I've often felt that Bellevue City Council is too pro-business. They didn't deal with the high-tension power wires by insisting they be buried. They are allowing all these Amazon jobs to come in. I live in one of the corridors that's being impacted by the design program. So Somerset isn't going to get apartment buildings, but Northeast Bellevue is getting apartment buildings very close. We're getting apartment buildings in density in Microsoft right next door, and I don't see City Council doing things to protect our quality of life. I don't see additional parks. I don't see additional. Where are you going to put the additional parks? How are you going to maintain quality of life for the poorer areas of the city? Maintaining equity in terms of services, access, and public services.
Who are you?
Okay, so
No, pick one.
one person.
Jennifer Robertson.
So we have created the growth corridors to put the density where it belongs, which is in the commercial areas. And we're making sure that we put money into infrastructure to get to those. We have almost 100 parks in Bellevue, 2,700 acres of parkland. And one of the reasons we are a livable city is because of all those parks. I've been on the council for 10 years. Every time we've had the opportunity to buy open space, we've done it. We're protecting that undeveloped areas. And we will continue to do that. It's good for the environment, it's good for our urban flooding, and it's good for people to get outside.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to put 30 seconds on the clock for the person to give the question, because we got to have short questions or not. Only one person, two people.
Time for a few more questions. Sir.
Okay, any other questions that hasn't been talked?
Hi, Randy Fritzenberger, Bellevue High School teacher. I'll try to keep this short. I was pleased to hear about the free canopy assessment and get the opportunity to sit and move forward with that program. My question for Councilmember Zahn is how can opportunities like the Environmental Stewardship Initiative the city's going forward with make Bellevue a leader on topics like climate change? We failed to meet our goals by 2020. There's more that we can do. How can Bellevue do more to lead the community?
We can absolutely do more. So we're in the middle of updating our environmental stewardship initiative. There was a workshop. Anyone go? Well, I encourage you.
We're all at the bridal trails.
Oh, okay. Because there are a lot of things we can do. There's also the K4C, which is the 16 cities that are looking at climate action. There are a lot of community groups that have great ideas. I've been advocating for Portland actually has almost 200 different actions, whereas Bellevue only has somewhere in the 50s. So we absolutely have a lot more we can do.
Okay, Michelle. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We have time for 2 or 3 more questions.
Carry on. I know, I did that also.
I have a question about actually working with community and how input really works in the city. And my question is for Jeremy Barksdale, and I would like to know how he would handle it. I have observed that there's a lot of talk about community involvement, there's a lot of talk about input, but in actuality, projects get put on the schedule, they get moved along quickly. There's not very much input. There's an instance I know of recently where there was one focus group meeting and then 9 months of nothing, and then it's moving along.
Question?
So I want to know how you would make sure that that actually happens and that the input is substantive at the right point.
All right, so you might be surprised to know that this happens in the private industry as well. We have, one of the things that we really try to push is for ongoing continuous engagement with people that, and in this case, with you all, our community. So instead of waiting until there's a project that's on the books or something needs to happen, keeping that conversation going and understanding what the needs are in the community along the way helps with knowing who to go to in terms of which community and what the top issues are. And tactical urbanism, which means giving you a chance to engage in providing input and pilots as they are happening.
Okay, any other topics that we haven't covered? Okay, we have some time after this, if the people have time to stay here. We have to be out of the building at 9 o'clock, but until then, you can still ask Jeff your personal questions, and they all have websites and stuff you can check in on.
What I would like to do, if it's okay, is the candidates spend all this time coming. Why don't we give them 30 seconds each to, quote, close the deal?
Well, I gave them the differentiation, so we actually can't because it's almost 8:30.
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay.
And John has to go to bed.
John has to get up at 3:30 again tomorrow. Yeah, this time he's headed to Daniels.
So I want to first a couple things before we leave. One of the things that One Bellevue did this year is we asked candidates some questions before all these questions, which are written out on this sheet. So if you're looking for some more answers of what the candidates agree on or disagree on, look at this scorecard sheet. It gives you our onebellevue.us address, which will have more information, including stuff from the primary that included some of their top issues, how they prioritize issues. And I also want to thank the candidates for coming. They have one more question. City to have a candidate forum to come to. There's a lot of neighborhood forums, but not many people get to go to those because they're, in one neighborhood and not maybe yours. Or you're busy that day. Seahawks game was on one of them. Things like that. So,
and thank you, Pam Johnston, and One Bellevue.
We have to clean up, but the candidates, if they're still available and they don't have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe they'll have to some of your questions one-on-one. Thank you. And thank you, John, for coming out and staying up late.